Okay. So,
You're fine.
yeah. Yeah, so where does that leave us? Now remember, that's Dr. Bernard Leiter, who's really, extremely, knowledgeable and respected. I would say even central banker, because he had a lot to do with formation of the European Monetary Union. But also a leader now in alternatives, so some of the things that we might talk about here in terms of local exchanges and even cryptocurrency is another one of the subjects at this day. But that's him, and he explained it. He explained it right there. Krugman told him. Krugman asked him, "Whatever you do, don't touch the money. Whatever you do, don't touch the money." So that's what I mean by the institutional and intentional ignorance. Okay? And so that's why the bankers are so happy to see, these little groups of people out there, raising their signs in front of the Federal Reserve, which, by the way, I think we should be doing again and more, Nick. and so that's what's there. So we have the academic narrative, don't touch the money. The academic outcome, monetary ignorance, there isn't any question about it. The political economic outcome, which is the political economic reality that we live in, secular stagnation, no ability to grow, and the debt saturation driven austerity to try to inform, what should be happening. So we can't do anything because we have austerity. We can back it up. How do we get there? We get there from ignorance. We get there from ignorance of not knowing the importance of the money system and how it really works. But why is that? That's allowed to happen. And the answer is because it's nobody's job in the government. There's nobody who has the task to make damn sure that there's sufficient incomes always to pay the debts that our prosperity requires. And this is related to my Hyman Minsky stuff. So that's kind of like, my idea about the problem. Okay, the problem is that it's nobody's job to make sure that we have adequate incomes in the economy to pay the debts that are required, because our money system only comes into existence by debts, in order to have prosperity. So having said that, I'm going to go over a couple of the slides from my talk last year here before we went to the Netherlands. And to me, and by the way, this is something that I feel is more important and more critical right now, because there is a large segment, especially of the youth in terms of the population, that are questioning the capitalist system directly. Okay? Well, the capitalist system doesn't seem to be working for us. It's turning us out to be workers and employees after we've gone through university and come out with more debt than most of our parents ever had, quite frankly. And so they're questioning, they're saying, well, this system don't seem to work. A few years ago, I gave a talk on Dr. William White. If anybody remembers my talk on Dr. William White when he was head of the BIS, in which he gave an interview with the Cobden Center in the UK, and in which he said, the central bankers of the world are kind of worried about the fact that this system don't seem to be working. And so that's another part of it. That's another part of it. Central bankers know that the system's not really working. They know it. They know it. It's impossible for the central bankers right now to do anything to get us out of that secular stagnation. It's not possible, because we need more debts. We need more debt in order to get out of that sector. And yet we have debt overhang. We have debt saturation. So what do? Austerity. That's what we do. Somehow or other, austerity is supposed to solve it. But this was Minsky's observation in working paper 127. And by the way, again, I'm taking Minsky back from the modern monetary theory people. They have missed Minsky's most important work that he ever did, and he did it at the end of his life after he spent so much time studying financial instability. And in his working paper number 127, and I want to be a leader of the 127 movement, if that's what we're going to call ourselves, he said this in the first page. This is how he begins his working paper on the decline of banking and public policy implications of the situation that we're in. He said, the definition of the problem is that banking plays two roles in a modern capitalist economy. It supplies the means of payment, and it channels resources, that is financial resources, into the capital development of the economy. And my emphasis is just that I put those underlines and the thing in it. So that's his statement of the problem. And if that's the problem, how do we solve it? You know, we can't let it continue if it's the problem. And he does have a suggestion, and it's the same one that I'm going to get to. And in the body of it, when he finally gets through his pages of how capitalism works and the capital development of the economy, he comes to discussing the reforms of the 30s. And he says much of economic history of the United States could be written in terms of attempts to get money right. So that's kind of funny, because here's a guy who says much of the economic history, and I do agree with that. When you see people who write about the history of money, and write about the history of our monetary economy, it attempts to get the money right. This history of reform and subsequent failure, followed by another round of reform, and I would add, and another round of failure, reflects the two not completely compatible requirements placed upon the monetary and banking system, which ought to provide a safe and sound medium of exchange, and to furnish challenge for the financing of the capital development of the economy. So what he said is that that's the history that we have in terms of our economic history and monetary history. That's the history that we have. And in that same chapter, he brings up the reforms of the 30s, and he says this. Thus, as the 21st century is about to be ushered in, an idea which was on the table during the 30s, discussion of reform, can once again be on the table. One virtue of the 100% money scheme, and he identified Fisher's 100% money scheme, is that it separates the two functions that the monetary and banking system has to perform. Again, he repeats what those two are. So that's the thing about the 100% money system, is that it separates. And as I've always said, that great thinkers think alike. And so this was a paper that I wrote for the Global Economic Intersection. It says 2016, but I was sure that it was a couple of years before that. But I wrote that the problem with money and banking is inseparability. We can't have money without the banking. No, inseparability. That's the problem. Now, so I was saying that, and that is in keeping with everything that Hyman Minsky, identified. And when it comes to this, the time has come to open and this is his modest proposal. This is like we would say. This is the conclusion paragraphs. The time has come to open a national inquiry into the structure of the money, banking, and financial system. Now, he's an economist. He was a research economist. He was publishing papers like crazy, and he wanted to keep publishing papers like crazy. And right there, he didn't touch the money system. He said the time has come to open a national inquiry into the structure of the banking and financial system, because that's what economists write about. They don't write about money. And forget about the radical changes, in computer and communication. But he says the sluggish economy of the past decades, and so now this is generations, okay, combined with the apparent reluctance of the Fed, inability of the Fed to get to full employment, can mean that our financing structures are not consistent with the needs of a progressive democracy. And to me, that's what we should have on the flag when we're walking out there in front of the Fed. We want a monetary system that is capable of meeting the needs of a progressive democracy. And sorry again. This is the second half of it. The same conclusion. In the past, serious changes were the result of serious public inquiries. And so my point here is that whether it's the Swiss referendum, or what's going to happen in Germany, or what's going to happen wherever, and with us in the United States, and with those people in Canada, All of this, when I call for a National Monetary Commission, I'm calling for national monetary commissions, because money is a national identity. Everybody has their own unit of accounting their money. With the results of serious public inquiries, I suggest that enough is amiss in our financial and banking structures that it's time to go back to the drawing board and determine what the monetary, financial, and financing arrangement should be in the 21st century. A late 20th century monetary commission should be on the public policy agenda. Now, that's it. You know, that's it. Either Hyman Minsky is absolutely, you know, clearly correct in both his observations of the problem, and almost uniquely, in my opinion, given that he was given that he was really mostly a research economist, to delve into the political economy part of it, of a late 20th century National Monetary Commission should be on the public policy agenda. Not only should be on the policy agenda, it should be at the top of the policy agenda. Because if it's on the agenda, somebody will make sure that we never get to that part of the agenda, and we can't let that happen. So to me, I have been advocating, and I advocated it with Stephen Zarlanga here. You know, people saw me and Stephen kind of going around about it, you know, God bless him. I'm back here doing it again. You know, because he's not here to say, Joe, how do you know who's going to be on that? How do you know who's going to be on that monetary commission? How do you know you're going to be successful? We've had lots of monetary commissions, which was what Steve said. All of it true, but it's just a matter of that now it becomes our job to do that. You know, once you recognize that it needs to happen, then it becomes our job to make it happen and to do it. So that's really where we're at, and it's really important to remember that one of the reasons that Minsky would have said that is because the system that we have now, this Federal Reserve banking system, you know, was the recommended outcome of the National Monetary Commission that you know, that the Aldriches and the Rockefellers and the Morgans wanted us to have, which is the fractional reserve banking system. This is the monetary system that we have, is a fractional reserve banking system. Think about that. We don't really have a monetary system. We have the fractional reserve banking system. In case people don't recognize it, the fractional reserve banking system, described as the legalized crime of banking by Silas W. Adams, with whom I agree, okay, is a system wherein the United States Congress imparted to this Federal Reserve banking system that they created the ability to use our unit of account in creating the bank credit that they issue. That's the crime, okay? It's our money system, we define the unit of account, that's it, that is, and then we let these people issue it. And not only issue it, but determine the capital development of the economy. And nobody should let those words go over as words. Because the capital development of the economy is how we got where we are. It's how we got to all these outcomes. That's basically the people that the bankers lent the money to determine the capital development of the economy. Sorry. And this is the section 18 of the Aldrich bill, which gave that national monetary authority. And here's what I think are the salient points. It's not very long. Shall be the duty of the Commission to inquire into and report to Congress at the earliest date practicable what changes are necessary or desirable in the monetary system of the United States or in the laws relating to banking and currency. That's what a monetary commission should do. The commission shall have the power, and this is key because you have to empower the commission to come to examine witnesses, make investigations and examinations of the subjects committed to their charge as they shall deem necessary. And when that passes, I don't want to say it's a blank check, but it is kind of a blank check for them to go do what they want. Now this was 1908. So what did they do in 1908? They studied, I think in 1908 they studied France, and then in 1909 they studied I don't know, somewhere in the South Pacific, and in 1910 somebody else, in 1911. So in other words, this became the junket for the bankers and the Congress people to go out and let's study money here and there. And in the meantime, no change was taking place, so that in the end, by the time by the time the final report of the commission was to come out, they recommended the Federal Reserve banking system as if it was going to solve all those problems. And it was promised to solve all those problems, and in 1913 they passed the act, and ever since then, the bankers have created all our money. And that is a dastardly outcome. I would say it's uncivil, immoral, and needs to be changed. So as a part of the Alliance for Just Money, this is where I get in trouble, okay? Part of the Alliance for Just Money, I happen to chair the Legislative Action Committee, okay? And our committee is prepared a resolution for consideration by the Board of Directors. And don't worry, I'm not going to let it all out right here. I'm just going to let out the introduction, okay? Because this is how we introduce the resolution. The resolution of the Alliance is proposed and adopted first to call for the establishment of a Commission of Public Inquiry into the National Money System of the United States of America. Second, to ensure that such a National Monetary Commission is established with sufficient enabling powers and authorities to acquire into and consider alternative systems, structures, and institutions to that of the present private debt-based money system in this country, and to recommend a viable alternative structure to our present system. And finally, to ensure that a new monetary system of 100% public ownership, issuance, control, and regulation of our national money and of foreign coin. Thank you, Randy Cook, because this is an understanding that we didn't have to talk about. Be among the alternative options inquired upon by the proposed, national money system, and following that is a series of whereases of why we need the National Monetary Commission, and then in the end, what basically would be what is proposed. So my point is that I'm doing what I can, and the point is that however it happens, whenever it happens, and wherever it happens, to me, without having a National Monetary Commission to inform all those people that we have identified earlier in the previous presentations and in previous years as the, again, structural and institutional ignorance, that is how they keep us down. That is how they keep us down. That keep us ignorant of the monetary system. And what was it that Martin said? Well, the hardest job was to get anybody to understand that there was an issue. But if you had a National Monetary Commission, everybody would understand that there's an issue, because we have this thing called the internet. We have the ability of the media to deny it, as they were doing up there. In the course of a National Monetary Commission would fill the pages of the newspapers and all electronic forms of media with what the monetary system is all about. And so I'm concluding here by saying to everybody that whatever you're thinking about in terms of moving money to be more of a democratic institution capable of meeting the needs of a progressive democracy, please put a monetary commission, a national study of the money system at the top of the agenda. And if you do that, I think you have a good chance, a much better chance, and perhaps I think the only chance for being successful. And I'll leave it at that and say thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doug. Okay.
Thank you. Great presentation, Joe. I think what's real important to work into this is who is on that monetary commission. And in my reading, I read about this Macmillan Commission in the United Kingdom, during the Great Depression or whatever they were inquiring in, and they had community people involved, they had labor leaders involved. So it's important that this monetary commission is just not composed of economists from the Federal Reserve. And that's really what you know, because it isn't hard to understand this stuff. It's just hard to believe that that's our system.
You're right, I totally agree. You know, after this resolution comes out of the, out of the legislative committee and actually gets before the board of directors, it's one of the things that we're gonna, you know, have to look into in terms of how do we demand, you know, a publicly minded and a publicly spirited commission to look at these questions. So I do definitely agree with that.
Well, I'm excited about something, because I was mixing up the monetary commission with the monetary authority in terms of what you were saying in the online discussions. So now I completely understand what you're talking about. And you mentioned that when, in 1908, we had the monetary commission, it did a lot of investigating, it did a lot of thinking, and then the bankers wrote the Federal Reserve Act.
Yeah.
So the idea that really excites me, I mean, I'm volunteering for the Monetary Commission, and I'm quite serious in that the model of Buckminster Fuller's quote, which I can't remember exactly, but the gist of it is, don't fight the existing system, create a new one that replaces it. So we have all of the tools we need to crowdsource a monetary commission, and it requires structuring which was one of my goals anyway, was to have a place where we can pull people together and get different input and walk people along the path towards understanding. And instead of trying to get Congress to do it, let's just do it. I mean, we actually have most of the powers we need. We can go interview people. What's that?
Dollars, unit of account. You need to have a whole big bag full of those in order to do that.
Okay, well, let's have a Kickstarter campaign and raise it.
That's a thought.
You know, Bernie's shown us that there's a lot of money out there in little donations.
Okay.
We have a lot of people who care. Let's just do it.
Okay.
Let's just do it. It's our first thing to do.
Oh,
Right, up here.
So I wish Martin was here to hear your talk and respond to it, because it seems part of what you're suggesting, and I've heard you talk about this before, is that gap that he identified. The conclusion of his talk was that we have to work within the existing system, and that was the central bankers, commercial bankers, and Parliament, I think you said. And yet those were the very forces that were completely against the Full Belt Initiative.
Right.
And the only place they really made progress was on the streets and talking to real people, but those real people didn't vote as they thought. So, you know, he didn't really address how to work within that system, and I think you're calling for doing that.
Right.
And Nick is saying we have to make sure we get the right people in that. I think that was maybe some of what Stephen was, you know, against in setting it up.
Yeah.
And you're confident we can get it. Virginia's confident we can get it. She's suggesting don't go through getting an act to have a national monetary commission. I don't know which force, you know, crowdsourcing it and kickstarting it, and maybe both. Maybe that's the answer, that it should happen at the official level, but absolutely be happening at our level as well, and we have to have our people in there, in the official one. And, you know, Stephen Walsh had said previous years, we can have middle school and high school students also doing the National Commission in their classrooms. And so, you know, I think those 3 levels, 4 if more, but I would like to hear you respond to what I said.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so you know that before I knew I was going to go to the Netherlands and visit with IMMR, Dr. Emma Donning, who was kind of handling the website for the Swiss referendum, and I wrote to her about congratulating them for moving forward. But I asked her, I said, have you thought about whether or not you should have a commission of inquiry first in order to have the vote be well informed, by the people there? And she said something like, well, we did, but, we wanted to, we moved forward. And so then the vote happened, and I wrote to her again, and I said, okay, the vote has happened. Now, maybe your response to this should be, well, we think we need to have a National Monetary Commission so that people can better understand the issues. And when we say people, all the people. And we conversed about that, and so that to me is still out there. In other words, to me, a National Monetary Commission call is appropriate both before and after, just depending on how things go. To have an initiative when there's a referendum initiative available nationally. Why just? Well, if my dad was right, 90% of the bankers don't know how money is created. I think John might agree with me, but I don't know. But 95% of the economists, don't know. 99%, no, it's 100%. Dad, sorry, it's 100% of the people in the Congress don't know how money is created. Now they know where their money comes from, and it comes from the people that create the money. Okay, so that's the thing that we got to be able to overcome. And to me, the only way that we can overcome that is to say, to get from the collective, intentional ignorance on this issue that we've all had to deal with, over to the side of a well-informed public and a well-informed Congress and much better informed economists, if not bankers, as to what is going on with the monetary system. That then, we could be capable of providing a rational alternative to the system that we have now. So I don't know if I really did answer that part of the question, but will you let me off with that?
Joe, a question. I'm having trouble understanding how grassroots organizations like our organization would maintain control of the National Monetary Commission, given what's going on, just as an example, with the money behind MMT, and they're very, quote, progressive. They would probably love to have a National Monetary Commission so they could, be part of it. That's part of it. And historically, going back into history, the major group that comes to my mind that changed how people really understood the money system was the Farmers Alliance, and they did it by having tens of thousands of their own members be lecturers and in small groups educate each other about the monetary system. And they almost did work. They became the Progressive Party, but then we know what happened. But that's my concern.
I don't want to make it sound like it's not my concern, okay? Because it is, for sure, okay? But you know what? The farmers didn't have the internet, okay? I really think that if they had the internet, the Greenback Party and the Farm Delivered and the Progressive Party and all those guys would have won it, okay? But when the media is controlled by the same people that you're trying to work against, they had to overcome that, like you said, individually in small groups and in coffee clutches or respectfully. But they didn't have a means of communication, and we do. And we would have to absolutely optimize, if you will, the use of the media to our advantage. But once, to me, I guess what I'm thinking is that once the word's out there, once the Financial Times is really talking seriously about, there's a question going on about who should create the money. Who should create the money? That's the question, And once they're into that, they're going to be forced, and I go back to my comments about Dr. William White a couple of years ago. The central bankers know that we can't get out of this hole that we're in, okay, under this capitalist system with using the monetary system. They know that, and he said as much. If anybody don't remember his quotes. So they know that, and even the bankers, the bankers know that. The bankers know that for sure. But who doesn't know it? The economists don't know it. The Congress doesn't know it. So that's the information gap, the ignorance gap that we have to aim at overcoming. Because they're the ones that are going to write the laws that are going to amend, that are going to pass the Need Act. They're the ones that are going to have to do that. Will they do it now? Okay, let me just back up a second, because here's two things. One directly responsive to what you said. This is a note that I had that I forgot to read. The progressive and emerging anti-capitalist movement for social justice excuse me, is being prevented from joining and coalescing with the reform movement, that's us, by MMT, modern monetary theory people. They're a movement against us. They're a movement against justice. They're a movement in favor of maintaining the status quo. They're well-funded, and everywhere you and I want to go, there they are. And so that's the kind of thing that we have to overcome. We have to overcome it directly. So there's misinformation out there, both with regard to who we are, both with regard to how the monetary system works, both with regard to what they're about, so also in regard to that. So in other words, that's one of the things absolutely that we have to overcome. But the other, okay, Rev Coates, who spoke here for the last couple of years, decided that he wanted to go to his Congress people. And Rev Coates he's a great speaker and a great leader, And he told those Congress people in Maryland that he was not going to support anybody that didn't support the Need Act. Can you imagine? That's Rev Coates. That's the way he is. So he invited me to go up to Congress with him and to talk to the staff people and to the Congress people if we could. And we went there, okay? And we went to Steny Hoyer's office, and we had about 10 or 12 staff people from the banking committee. I think it's the banking. I forget what actually the House Banking Committee, but it's something else now. They renamed it.
Financial Services Committee.
Yeah, Financial Services Committee. So the thing is that they were there, and we went in, and Rev Coates said this and that. And first of all, they were all the top staff people, the top economic advisor staff people, and they didn't know what the heck Rev Coates was talking about. And when Rev Coates said, well, I'm talking about the monetary system. You know how money is created, right? And they all kind of just looked at each other, So how could we make any progress there? How could Rev convince the Congress people there that in fact they needed to act to overcome, again, this inertia, this secular stagnation that everybody says, oh, that's the words, that's the words that describe the economy today. How could he do that? And ultimately, Elijah Cummings, when he came in after he talked to the staff person, he said, Rev, I have 130 primary issues that I'm working on, okay? And you're bringing me number 131. And I haven't heard about it from anybody else. So it's up to you to build the constituency to make me move on it. Now that's kind of a typical political posture, I move when you move me, Well, that's what we want to do. That's what we want to do. Now, I don't know where Rev Coates is at on the National Monetary Commission, quite frankly. I haven't talked to him in a while. But that's what we want to do. We want to move through the National Monetary Commission So that it's not only the staff people, but the constituents that are able to do it. Okay?
Okay, I'm gonna jump in right here. And I like everything I'm hearing. I really like Virginia's idea. I think that it's up to us to create this National Monetary Commission and invite people. We gotta invite people from the Poor People's Campaign, from the labor groups, from the Democratic Party, from the Republican Party, from the Federal Reserve, but certainly not exclusive of those, trying to get as many, and who knows who's gonna come or whatever. But I think that's the kind of the way that we can get this out, and that's it. I mean, just think as a broad, a group that we can get representing people.
Well, that's good. That's a good thought.
Just a quick building on that. Given the state of our government now, I don't think there's much interest in inquiry in anything. So I'm just wondering, is there an alternative way that we can formulate a commission that doesn't rely on the government? When's the last time we've actually had a commission?
Well, we haven't, well, a commission, we've had plenty of commissions, but in terms of a monetary commission, not the last one.
Any commission.
You started in 08 and went till 11.
So that's actually a little bit what I was going to speak to is the question Paul was just raising. I think there's a lot more to getting together a credible group, sort of like I heard Stephen saying, than might be understood here. But one model that I think might be interesting to look at, I don't know if you've heard of the Citizens Assembly on Electoral Reform in British Columbia. So in British, I'm waiting to see.
I'm sorry.
Don't wait, keep going.
Okay.
So in British Columbia, they had some citizens raising a very complex issue. They wanted to reform the electoral system. And they came up with a process, they called it the Citizens Assembly on Electoral Reform. And what they did was they carefully designed a random selection system. And they selected something like 180 citizens, making sure there were like 2 from every, I don't know what it was, county in British Columbia, and making sure Aboriginals were included somehow, something like that. And this commission, they sent out these invitations and found people randomly selected who were willing to participate for as long as it took, something like that. And it started with a 3-month process, I think, of education, where they worked very hard to find all these different perspectives, to give lectures and educate the citizens to the different perspectives out there. And then they turned into something like a grand jury, where they started to be able to go ask questions and do investigations and travel around and come to their own conclusions. And so I think this process had a lot of special credibility achieved through random selection. So I think it's something to look at.
Yeah, I'm definitely holding, that idea that we can do it without the government, okay? But in the end, what do you do? What do you do with it? Okay. In the end, if our citizens' initiative, comes to the conclusion that we want to change the money system, and we haven't involved the Congress, then we have to go to the Congress and tell them, this is what we think should happen. Now that would have a groundswell of support, public support, as you said. But does it work to hold the Congress accountable?
Well, that's a question worth asking. My intent here was just to broaden the perspective a bit on different methodologies that might be used, not necessarily exclusive of one another, but maybe to overcome some of the conventional aspects of what I hear you proposing, which I think
Okay.
has some downsides.
Okay. Well, we all hear that. We all hear that. John?
As recently as 4 or 5 years ago, there was some talk of a monetary commission, and it was introduced by Republicans as a Senate bill. Where it went, it must have just floundered somehow. But it was on somebody's radar screens, and it was in the very recent past. So there is some talk of this. Somehow came to my attention, and it was a Republican Senate bill.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'll say about that is there's a call for a National Monetary Commission every year, or every session of Congress, excuse me, that's advanced by the Libertarians and the Conservatives to get us back onto a gold standard. And I say, okay, and let's just add 2 or 3 clauses to that to make sure I would say I wouldn't shut out considering the gold standard. I wouldn't say that, but in considering it, let's consider what the alternatives are, what the costs and the benefits of each are. So that's my answer to that. Okay, John? Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I would love to do that. Just take the existing bill that's in both bodies really, and change it to being something that's more purposeful, public purposeful. Okay. Stephen? Sorry.
So, we're talking about this in sense of some purpose, and the purpose for a lot of people is social justice, and for other people, they might say, well, if you're for just a level playing field. So how does the concept of a level playing field play relative to people's sense of what's right and appropriate?
Milton Friedman was a guy who Nick knows well. I know I was going to get attention by mentioning Milton Friedman. He was one of the people that when my dad was trying to convince me about all this stuff, he said, Irving Fisher and Henry Simons and all those guys, and Milton Friedman, and I just said, huh? Milton Friedman. But then my dad gave me his paper, which was called a monetary and fiscal framework, a monetary and fiscal framework for economic stability. And in there, he laid out what is essentially the NEAT Act. Okay, that's what I'm going to say. Dr. Milton Friedman laid out what is essentially, he said all money should be created by the government. Okay, and the question to him was why? And the answer that he gave was that one right there. He says, because without having a money that's issued by the government, for public purpose, we will never have a level playing field in the economy. Because one group of people is going to be able to determine what the capital development of the economy is. And they're going to do it with their associates, and they're going to do it with their friends, they're going to do it with the people at the country club, et cetera, and that's the unlevel playing field that we have now. And Milton Friedman said, well, we need to change that. We need to have first a level playing field with money, and then let competition and free enterprise and markets work on top of that. And until we have that, we'll never have it. So the point is that I'm trying to make is in response is just to say that the level playing field is the result of having nobody else creating money. Only the government. That money comes into existence not on the basis of any private interest that can leverage the placement of the fulcrum on the balance sheet, on the balance beam of the economy, and instead it's going to, excuse me, be forced to that everybody will compete equally and equitably, and that's something that I believe in myself. I'm a believer in banks, and I'm a believer in the banking system.
So why couldn't this level playing field subsume all these other approaches to the environment, to poverty, to all these other things? Why not have to make the overriding argument a level playing field?
That's just something to consider. I wouldn't be able to answer that question, to be honest. To me, it's just integral to everything else that that we're talking about and trying to do and achieve.
To me, it sounds like a powerful educational tool.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have questions?
Okay, thank you very much.